and the Duke of Parma is about to have a visit by Cosimo II de' Medici. In a frantic panic, he summons his architect and tells him that he wants to convert the armory in his palazzo for a special show for Cosimo. The architect, under the demand of immense change, has a moment of inspiration, and he introduces to the world the first proscenium theatre in 1618. It's nearly 400 years since that theatre. We are still sitting in it. This story came to me in the early 1990s, and it occurred to me at that point that with the developments that were taking place with digital technologies, with computer control systems, with material science, with communication in general, that there was something that I wanted to call the Farnese disconnect. Somehow, the idea of how we would approach the design and the empowerment of these spaces for one of the most important and universal human activities, that of sharing stories, it seemed to have eluded us. And so, luckily for me at that time, my life had taken me from Port-of-Spain to London, where I was living. During my time in London, I came under the influence of quite a number of people, all of whom played a part in the development of how I would approach this next generation of storytelling environment. Some of those people were William Blake, the Romantic poet; Richard Wagner, the controversial but incredibly brilliant musician, poet, essayist, philosopher; Renzo Piano, an architect at the time who had, after the Pompidou Center and the Chibao buildings, shown the most poetic and wonderful way to approach buildings and their presence within societies in a very elegant way; Steve Jobs at Apple, who really had said two things. One, that you must design so that it is democratic, so that people would actually want it, people would actually use it. And he said another very important thing back in the very early 90s. He said that it would be better to build a computer that wasn't so powerful and put into the hands of one man than to build a computer that was far less powerful and put it into the hands of 1,000. What Steve Jobs was actually saying is that if you produce something that became a tool, then that tool, given to the many, produces far greater leaps of creativity. And so I knew that the next generation of theatre would be a tool. Last but not least, there was Nicholas Negroponte. Negroponte is the founder of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
Media Lab.
And he had a vision. His vision was that in the future, entertainment, education, and immersion would all come together. We know that to be true. John Meader is a director of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and this equation was mentioned by him in a TED talk. I loved it for its simplicity and for its reality. He said A plus B equals C, and by that what he meant is that in the world in which we currently find ourselves, atoms plus bits, computer information, is equal to the new craft. There are some people that believe that computer technology is not art. That is incorrect. And John Meader has shown that in the most elegant of ways. When you look at an aeroplane, something that happened to me on one of my flights during this time of reflection upon how to approach this disconnect, you see the solution. Elegance of design, poetry in motion, computer technology, material science, and function. And so it was that I realized that the approach to the next space that will tell stories would come more from the world of technology and aerodynamics than it would from the worlds of bricks and mortar. This man is Walter Gropius. And in a discussion at that time, when I mentioned this approach, a friend of mine had said to me, "Do you know of Walter?" I said, "Yes, I did." He was the director of the German Bauhaus from 1914 to 1933. But what I didn't know about Walter is that he had spent his life in hot pursuit of the very same thing that I was currently doing, to address the Farnese disconnect. Walter had a passion. He created a project called the Total Theatre. He gave a lecture in Rome in 1929 in which he spoke about a philosophy that was identical. He said that the next generation of storytelling space would bring together in complete collusion visual image, moving image, performer, sound, special effects in all manner, and that it would not only be in front of the audience, but it would be all around them, in the center of them, maybe even above them. I had to jump on a plane immediately, and I had to fly to Boston, because I found out that at the Bush Freisinger Museum at the Harvard University, Walter's papers had been housed. I discovered when I went there that so passionate was he about it that when he fled Germany during the Second World War, one of the only things he wanted to take with him was his precious model of the total theater. It was destroyed. This is Walter's theater. I was relieved because the approach was completely different to the one that we had actually settled upon. Walter's theater was built on an ellipse. It had a rotating stage in the center with seats that allowed the stage to be either thrust or in the round. He had a parabolic roof, and he had suggested that the projections be on the wall, which, as you can see, was not perfectly symmetrical. He was a very, very, very brilliant designer, but not a very good engineer. And later investigations have shown that it would not have worked, although the idea for 1929 was superb. This was the result of what we had come up with. We based it on a circle, 10 sections of seats in the round, the audience in the single most powerful arrangement that we know of, and the action at the center. We had decided that this would be the tool, the format for the tool, from which we would then bring together sound, light, moving image, special effect, and live performance as it had never been done before. We wanted to know how to house this, and there too we thought it shouldn't be done in the normal way. Theaters generally are of fixed appearance, and many of them extraordinarily decorative. They are expressions of the architect's ego. One of the things that we thought we should do is create a building that, to all intents and purposes, would house this magic distribution platform and would, in a way, allow itself, from its external appearance, to be able to be morphed by the director whose story was unfolding inside of it. In other words, a building that did not exist to all intents and purposes, other than for being a mirage, but which could materialize in the darkness according to what was happening inside of it. We decided to create the cylindrical structure to enclose the space frame, and outside of that, to create, using a series of thousands of bamboo poles, a screen. The idea would be that using digital projection, we could project onto the screen of the building during performances in the evening, and so turn the building from a simple bamboo screen enclosure into a mirage of visuals that match the story that is being told inside. Once inside, you enter the space frame. This is a combination of aerodynamic engineering, new material science, state-of-the-art projection technology, acoustic architecture, special effects, and a computer control, which at the time was called SMPTE. This is where a click track or a rhythmic track attached to the music or other digital media provides the cues upon which things can be deployed. It meant that within this space frame, we could, millisecond by millisecond, coordinate a ballet of illusion between the elements such as had never been done before. I'll fly you into the space frame now. This is the theater in its large configuration, seating 2,000 people. But we have found that as we have researched this, that the theater can be brought down to any different size and any different scale. The results are actually staggering. This is not an artist rendering. It is something called a simulation, which is not dissimilar to the type of approach that is taken when one is building an aeroplane. Inside, there is a complex system of motorized architectures that combine to create the sophisticated systems that allow this illusion. This is a photograph of that building that I told you about, and the invisibility of it. The way that we create that invisibility was that we looked at the idea that wherever the building would be placed, we would be able to, upon its surface, using large digital format photography, to wrap the drum of the building so as to make it disappear against the landscape. This is what it would look like at dusk with standard illumination. And then at night, a Leonid meteor shower in this instance for the show that was taking place inside. But what of the magic possibilities inside? Well, this is a simulation, not a rendering, of the type of 3D illusion that can be created within the space. Spherical objects rotating before your very eyes, transparent or opaque. This is the room with 2,000 people inside of it, a live performer rising on a cloud upon which projections are placed, and the audience getting a glimpse of a golden ocean, seemingly catapulted into the sky with the performer. These are spaceships flying through the arena with live performers on the stage that is capable of breaking itself into multiple arrangements through the magic of automation. This is a watery world and a goddess taking the audience deep into the deep beneath. And this is a typhoon filling the arena, and the strength of it causing the separation of the spirits of the people gathered in the theater from their very own bodies. Yes, this is all possible within this arena, which we called a sensorium. One of the things about it that we found was interesting, and these are discoveries that we made as we went along in the development of the system, was that it did something else. It allowed designers and stage set and prop managers to look at the whole issue of the design of their spectacles in a different way. This is an example. This is a spaceship. Now, we all know of George Lucas's spaceships with their windows and their jets and their engines and their pilots. But we thought, what if we applied high physics and mathematics to the concept of a spaceship? What if we looked at the idea that they've discovered that an electron can be in two places at the same time, and we translated that into an actual object? What would that spaceship look like? Well, it would mean that the spaceship would have some sort of intelligence of its own. It would have some kind of architecture that was liquid. It would be able to be in two places at the same time. It would claw its way across space by transmuting itself in some way. These are those spaceships. Imagine having to build that as a real prop in a real theater. You'd be kicked out of the room in 5 minutes. We vertically integrated the concepts that we had developed also a step down from that. So from the scale of the actual theater itself and the stage sets that surround the audience, we looked at the actual performers themselves. One of the things that we realized is that some of the software technologies and the approaches that we use to create the illusions could be applied to moving objects or moving targets in space. And that meant that we could also apply it to the performer. In this case, we call it WPT, Wearable Projection Technology. The idea is that we have something called pixel addressable space. What that means is that if I took a picture of this room with all of you in it, I would be able to sense in real time every single object and every single body in the position that it is in real time. By reading that in real time, and by then reprojecting through a system of softwares, we would be able to real-time motion capture, selectively reproject on an object, and therefore change it into anything that we wanted to. So in this case, I've done a few little paintings after this that show the transmutation of this solar dress, but she can be a ball of fire, she can turn to water, she can be consumed by birds and disappear into the darkness. We went a step further in integrating it vertically downwards. What about objects? What about going beyond the performer to objects? And so we looked at the idea of masks. And we thought that there must be a new language, a new vernacular that could come out of this mathematics, come out of this software technology. These masks we looked at producing in a whole new way. What we did was we took normal geometry, static geometry, spheres, triangles, squares, and in it we put the algorithmic mathematics that is the mathematics of life, really. One mathematics of static geometry, one of living. By putting the two together, we create objects such as this, almost a second skull. And in this way, we feel that we have developed a language that is very interesting because it resonates with people in a universal way, not necessarily through the culture of their various societies, but through the culture of the very way in which they are made. This is a finished version of what that mask finally came out like. And we decided to apply some of the ideas of material science and mechanics to it as well. So this mask actually projects off of the face, splits into two, and divides whilst being worn on the head. Using micro projectors as well as micro cameras, we are able to provide live feeds of images into the masks, creating, therefore, the world's first transmutable mask that can be controlled in real time during a performance. This is a little animation of that mask in motion. Well, what did we find with all of this as we got to the end of this whole process of developing all of this? We realized, of course, that there were immense commercial opportunities with it. It could be used for change the way that we have a conversation at corporate conferences. It could change the way that we actually looked at cinema and interacted with it. It could change the way that we looked at television and the production of television programs. It could change the way that you looked at trade shows. But there was something much more significant than this that we realized. We realized that it could change the way in which transformational experiences occurred in places that normally would not be able to have them. So, for example, this system is capable of transporting the inventory of a fine art gallery from a country in one place to somewhere else remote and inaccessible to that art. The importance of that point is that whilst you have projects such as Google Art, which allow you to look at it on your computer screen, as well as the internet, nothing will ever replace the very, very human need to gather, to share, and to see things in real space and real time. It is that moment that is the moment of edification. It is that moment that is the moment of changing conversation. It is that moment that is the moment of progress. And so, I am back, but this time in 1624. This is the time of the poets, the metaphysical poets who were writing in the United Kingdom, and one in particular, John Donne, said this: "No man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away, then Europe is a less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manner of thy friends as well as thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee." Thank you.